What if the blueprint for Elon Musk's empire wasn't drawn in Silicon Valley, but by a radical extremist in the 1940s? Long before SpaceX and Tesla, Musk's grandfather tried to destroy democracy, abolish money, and hand North America over to a cult of engineers. The government considered him such a massive threat, they had him arrested. He failed to change the world. But a century later, his grandson became the richest man on Earth. Today, we are opening the forbidden archives of Joshua Haldeman. Criminal convictions, apartheid propaganda, and death-defying flights over the African desert. Is Elon Musk simply a risk-taker, or is he finishing the empire his grandfather started? Number 1. The cowboy in the economic ruins. Official biographies usually sanitize Musk's grandfather, painting him as a quirky intellectual and a respectable chiropractor. But the reality is that Joshua Haldeman was a man of wild temperament and raw physical power. Before he ever put on a doctor's coat, he was a genuine cowboy in the harsh Canadian province of Saskatchewan. He broke wild horses, wrestled, boxed, and regularly performed in local rodeos, masterfully spinning a lasso for cheering crowds. He was a man who believed in self-reliance above all else. Eventually, he settled down, became a chiropractor, and acquired his own massive farm. But then the Great Depression hit, accompanied by the apocalyptic droughts of the Dust Bowl era. Black blizzards of topsoil blocked out the sun and scorched his crops. Despite his relentless hard work, the bank coldly foreclosed on his land. Imagine being a proud, self-made man and having a faceless financial institution take everything you own. Losing that farm didn't just make him angry at the government, it triggered a massive psychological shift. It pushed him toward a radical realization. The entire economic and political system was fundamentally broken. From that moment on, Haldeman began searching for a movement that promised to tear society down and rebuild it from scratch. Number 2. The technate and the death of money. To dismantle the system, Haldeman found the perfect weapon, a booming radical movement called Technocracy Incorporated. He didn't just join, he rapidly ascended to become one of its national leaders in Canada. The technocrats didn't want to tweak the laws. They wanted to rewrite human civilization. They publicly claimed the unthinkable. Democracy was a flawed experiment. Voters were too ignorant to understand economics, and the country needed to be run by a rigid, technical administration. Their master plan: to erase the borders of the United States, Canada, Mexico, and Greenland, merging them into a colossal continental megastate called the Technate. But here is the craziest part. Traditional paper money and the entire pricing system were to be completely annihilated. Instead of dollars, every citizen would receive an equal share of energy certificates. Every time you bought bread or a pair of shoes, the cost would be deducted from your personal energy limit, measured in ergs or joules. You couldn't hoard them, you couldn't invest them, and at the end of the accounting period, they simply expired. Decades later, Elon Musk would publicly describe cryptocurrency and money as just data that allows us to allocate energy. The wording is chillingly familiar. Number 3. The Cult of Gray Men, and number 1. 0450-1. Technocracy wasn't just a political party. It operated like a highly disciplined dystopian techno-cult that demanded absolute, terrifying uniformity from its members. Picture a massive auditorium in the 1930s. The members inside didn't wear regular clothes. They wore identical, austere, gray, double-breasted suits. They drove a fleet of cars exclusively painted a specific shade of gray, adorned with their official symbol, the monad, a yin-yang style emblem representing the balance of production and consumption. They even used a special, synchronized salute. Most bizarrely, to strip away individual ego in favor of the machine, some of the most devoted members abandoned their human names at meetings, introducing themselves by numerical designations. In the movement's official internal documents, Elon Musk's grandfather was formally listed as 10450-1. While no historian has proven a direct intentional link, the visual and philosophical echo is undeniable. When you look at Elon Musk's obsession with the letter X, the numerical name of his child XAEA12, the rebranding of Twitter, and the brutalist unpainted steel aesthetic of the Cybertruck, you are looking at the exact same cold aesthetic of technical supremacy that his grandfather worshipped a century ago. Number 4. Arrested for threatening the state. By 1940, the world was plunging into the darkest days of World War II. The Canadian government, sending its young men to die in Europe, realized that the technocrats, who openly opposed the draft and the traditional war effort, were a massive internal threat. Under the Defense of Canada regulations, authorities officially declared Technocracy Inc. a subversive organization and banned it completely. Any normal person would have backed down and hidden in the shadows. But you don't tell number 10450-1 to stay quiet. Haldeman brazenly challenged the authority of the entire British Empire. He walked into the offices of the Regina Leader Post and purchased a massive, highly visible ad space, publishing a defiant manifesto defending the banned technocrats. The government's response was swift and brutal. The Royal Canadian Mounted Police raided his operation and arrested him. He was dragged into court, where a judge found him guilty on 3 separate counts of publishing statements likely to cause disaffection to His Majesty. He was handed a heavy fine and court costs with a stark ultimatum: pay up or spend 2 months in a prison cell. While there's no definitive proof he actually served the jail time, the damage was done. His political career in Canada was permanently branded with a criminal conviction for subversion. Number 5. The Health Conspiracy. Following his run-in with the law, Haldeman grew disillusioned with the technocrats and pivoted to the Social Credit Party. But his views didn't mellow. They grew significantly darker. The man who once worshipped pure science and engineering transformed into a radical, paranoid conspiracy theorist. During the post-war era, as global organizations like the UN and the World Health Organization were forming, Haldeman began to see shadows everywhere. He published a highly controversial tract titled The International Conspiracy in Health. In this document, he didn't just criticize government policy. He claimed that public water fluoridation was actually a sinister brainwashing program. He linked mass vaccination campaigns to a shadowy group of globalists pushing for a one-world government, and he viewed state medical insurance as an instrument for secret international control. He ran for Canadian Parliament multiple times on these platforms, but the voters, perhaps sensing his extremism, rejected him in every single election. The democracy he despised had finally thrown him to the curb. Number 6. Flight to the Apartheid Empire. By 1950, Haldeman's fury had reached a boiling point. Disgusted with what he viewed as a socialistic, bureaucratic, and over-regulated Canada, he made a decision that sounds like pure fiction. If you hate your government, you might move to a different city. Joshua Haldeman dismantled his private single-engine airplane, meticulously packed it into massive wooden crates, gathered his wife and 4 young children, including Elon's future mother, May, and sailed across the Atlantic to relocate to South Africa. His choice of destination was deeply strategic and highly controversial. He arrived in South Africa at the exact moment the government was aggressively implementing the laws of apartheid, a brutal, institutionalized system of racial segregation. This didn't bother Haldeman. In fact, he later openly admitted that the new government's hardline policies were an added incentive for his move. He quickly became a fierce, vocal defender of white minority rule. He even published a book titled The International Conspiracy to Establish a World Dictatorship and the Menace to South Africa, in which he aggressively argued that all international criticism of the apartheid regime was nothing but a coordinated attack by globalists trying to destroy Western civilization. Number 7. Obsession with the Lost City. Once settled in Africa, Haldeman needed a new outlet for his boundless, restless energy. He found it in a dangerous obsession: the myth of the lost city of the Kalahari. Originally invented in the 1880s by a circus showman known as the Great Farini, the legend claimed that the ruins of a highly advanced ancient civilization were buried deep under the unforgiving desert sands. Indiana Jones belongs in the movies, but Joshua Haldeman believed he was living it. Starting in 1953, he organized and executed an astonishing 12 massive expeditions into the Kalahari. He would fly his fragile single-engine Balanca Crusair plane for hours over the scorching dunes at a terrifyingly low altitude, often just 200 feet above the ground, squinting into the sun, trying to spot the remains of stone walls. To put this in perspective, in the 1950s, over the Kalahari, there was no radar, no GPS, and no rescue teams. A single engine stall or a momentary piloting error at that altitude meant immediate, catastrophic impact. Number 8. Playing with death. The most terrifying aspect of these African adventures wasn't the flying itself. It was his cargo. Haldeman didn't take experienced co-pilots on these death-defying, low-altitude sweeps. He regularly packed his wife and his young, elementary school-aged children into the back of the plane. This absolute disregard for standard safety once brought the entire family to the very edge of oblivion. During one particularly harrowing family flight spanning about 800 miles across the wilderness, they completely lost their navigational bearings. For 3 agonizing hours, the family wandered blindly over the vast, uninhabited African landscape, entirely disconnected from the world, watching the fuel gauge drop closer and closer to zero. By a sheer miracle, 5 hours after takeoff, they managed to spot the city of Salisbury and landed with their fuel tanks practically running on fumes. For Haldeman, putting his family's life on the line wasn't a mistake. Risk was the ultimate drug, the main driving force of his existence. Number 9. The Fatal Flight. A man who spends his entire life spitting in the face of gravity, governments, and probability doesn't usually die peacefully in his sleep. In January 1974, the 71-year-old Joshua Haldeman was up in the sky again, practicing touch-and-go landings in his beloved airplane. During one of the maneuvers, the plane's wheels clipped a high-voltage power line hidden in the landscape. The aircraft violently flipped and crashed into the ground, instantly killing the radical adventurer. By the time of the crash, his grandson, Elon, was about 2.5 years old. Though Elon was too young to remember him directly, his mother, Mae Musk, spent her life cultivating her father's image as an absolute, fearless superhero. Elon grew up fed on these exact stories of extreme risk and defiance. Decades later, biographer Walter Isaacson would ask Musk about his grandfather. Elon's response explained everything. He knew that real adventures involve risk. Risk energized him. Number 10. The Paradox of Legacy. Joshua Haldeman, the man proudly known as Number 10450-1, tried to reshape the entire world through a radical political organization, and he failed miserably in a Canadian courtroom. But almost a century later, a strikingly similar belief in the absolute power of technology has manifested in his grandson. It is crucial to note the difference. The technocrats wanted to destroy capitalism and private property, whereas Elon Musk's empire is fueled by hypercapitalism and ruthless market competition. Elon isn't building his grandfather's technate. Yet, they share the exact same DNA. Both men display an absolute cult of risk, a belief in first principles engineering over bureaucracy, a deep contempt for traditional politicians, and a fanatical conviction that the men who build the machines should be the ones dictating the future. It makes you ask an incredibly uncomfortable question. Did the radical dream of a failed 1930s extremist actually die in an airplane crash? Or did it just skip a generation, waiting for a billionaire who could finally buy the rockets, the satellites, and the algorithms to make it a reality?